My name is Chris Gunter. I'm the chair of horticultural sciences, and I have the pleasure to serve as chair of the search committee. Welcome to the interview for Dr. Jason Ferrell. Many of you know Jay, but I'll give you just a brief introduction, and then I'll turn it over to him, and he has some more introductory material, and I don't want to steal his thunder here. So Jay is a prominent figure in the field of weed science and invasive plant management at the University of Florida. He's currently serving as a professor and interim department chair of UF IFAS's agronomy department. Dr. Ferrell brings a wealth of experience to his role. He's been with the university since 2004, starting as an assistant professor and progressively taking on leadership positions. In addition to his departmental responsibilities, Dr. Ferrell is the director of the UF IFAS Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants and the Pesticide Information Office, where he leads a multidisciplinary effort to develop strategies for addressing invasive plant impacts and ensures proper training and licensing for pesticide applicators. His expertise in weed science, combined with his leadership skills and commitment to research and education, have made him a valuable asset to the University of Florida's agriculture and environmental initiatives. So Jay, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I would say that introduction is generally correct. I'm not sure about prominent in the field, but we'll take that as it goes. Well, this is the title I was provided. It's a very good title, Cultivating Resilience, Opportunities, Challenges, and the Vision for the Future of UF Agronomy. But it's a bit of a mouthful of a title. So I've gone forward to make my own title because I think this more closely shows what I'm going to talk about today. So what the seminar is really Jay's view of the role of department chair and other things. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk about how I see the role of chair and then philosophically how I make decisions based on how I see these different pieces fitting together. So that's going to be what we do. Now, I've never seen anybody give a presentation like this for a chair's role, and there may be a really good reason for that, but we're going to go through it and we'll come out the other end. Now, they've asked me to start with a brief introduction of myself and sort of how I got here. And I'm doing this specifically for Luke Flory. He hates this part of every seminar, so we're going to do it just for Luke. Hopefully he's connected. He's in Lisbon right now. But I'm originally from Western Kentucky in this little forgotten about part of the country. So farming community. So as I came up, I knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture, but I didn't know what. Agriculture was just an enterprise of producing things. I didn't know there was a real distinction between animal sciences, plant sciences, horticulture, agronomy. I didn't know what those things were, but I knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture. So it came time to be thinking about where to go to school. And there are a bunch of really good little ag schools in this part of the country. And I can not see my pointer on my screen, but there's a little ag school here, Murray State, great little college. Down here, UT Martin. Again, wonderful little school. And if you're in like a 6-county region in Western Kentucky, you even get in-state tuition at UT Martin. So it's a pretty good deal. But I knew that those were not land-grant universities, and I knew that they had very strong teaching programs, but they didn't have research. So I said, I really need to know more, and I want something a little more than what those schools can offer. So the land-grant university is way over here in Lexington. So I knew that the University of Kentucky is where I wanted to go, so I started on that path. So, but again, still didn't know what I wanted to major in. So one night, it was a preview night there in Paducah, highlighted. They came down and did a college preview. They laid out all of these pamphlets for all the different majors. I didn't know what any of them were. I picked up one that said agronomy. I had never heard of agronomy. I was 16, 17 years old. But that was the day my life changed, because I'm reading the description for agronomy and said, I've never heard of this, but this is exactly what I want to do. So that was sort of my aha moment. So I went to the University of Kentucky a few years later, enrolled. I was the only person from my entire county to go there. Now, that sounds like a big feat. There weren't but 60 of us in the graduating class. So relax a little bit on thinking how big that trip was. But I end up at the University of Kentucky, and I'm probably in the 1%. I entered as a freshman as an agronomy major, finished 4 years later as an agronomy major. So I never changed my major, and I finished on time. But while I was there, I started becoming involved with different researchers and starting to work in their programs. And again, I didn't know one field. I didn't even know what agronomy was at one point. And definitely I didn't know there were all these different pieces and slices within agronomy. So I started working for the soybean agronomist. And very quickly, I found myself on the research farm, but I started seeing weed control plots. And I'm looking at these things going, you can tell on the left, there's no weed control. You can tell right here, there is weed control. And you're telling me that you can dissolve a powder into water, spray it here, and turn that into that. That felt like magic to me. I mean, this is like a potion that somebody is mixed. And I said, if I can be the one to figure out how to do that, there's value there. So I was always really interested in it. So as a sophomore, I became interested in weed science and then set my path on that. So when finished my bachelor's, went right into a master's program, completed that there at the University of Kentucky as well. Now, here's where the story was planned to end. My goal was to get a master's degree, go work for a chemical company, be a tech rep. There's a brand new vehicle every 2 years. There's an expense account, and it was going to be amazing. That is all I wanted out of life. Well, the mid-90s had this thing happen called Roundup Ready technology, and it totally changed the chemical industry across the whole country. So there were thousands of jobs evaporated in about a 3-year time span, right when I was getting ready to get out of there. People were losing their jobs, being forced to move. And I said, you know, this academic thing seems like a pretty good gig. You know, you don't get a free vehicle every 2 years, but you don't get fired as often. So I said, I had no intention of getting a PhD, but I found a really good program at the University of Georgia. Went there in 2000 and completed a PhD through 2000 to 2003. But I was very fortunate here. I was the only PhD student in the program. And really, there was only one other master student who left right after I got there. So it was just me and the advisor for the majority of my stay. And he invested a tremendous amount of time into me. Not only did he train me as a scientist, but he trained me as an academic. So he really taught me how the university works, what the university values, and how you get to success. So he really trained me how to come in as an assistant professor and immediately start on the path without a bunch of wasted time and wasted steps. So finishing up there, I found this opportunity, posted IFAS extension specialist within the agronomy department. So I came here in 2004 with a split appointment, 65% extension, 35% research with statewide weed management responsibilities. Now, kind of an odd split, 65-35, right? We see 60-40, 70-30. 65-35 was a weird one, still kind of a weird one. But what happened there was about a 2-year period where they had said anybody with greater than 30% research appointment has to write a CRISP project. There were a bunch of people at 30 that said, that's not greater than 30. I'm not writing one. So the dean of research said, we'll fix that. And he changed a bunch of us to 35 for a few years. But then we figured that out. So I was 65-35 for a long time, as weird as that split is. But when I had statewide responsibilities, I had responsibilities in row crops, pastures, and then in industrial right-of-way type areas. So we were able and fortunate to have a program that spanned from Fort Myers to Pensacola and just about everywhere in between. So it was a really fun way of getting to see a bunch of things and work with a whole lot of different people. So I had a number of different stakeholder groups and was really able to do a lot of fun stuff. But the research was one part. The big part was the extension responsibilities. All right, so lots of field days. Brent Sellers was hired in right at 1 year after me with a similar appointment with similar responsibilities. So we teamed up early on and we did a lot of cooperative extension work together. We did field days together. We made YouTube videos together. We did a lot of different things. We published together. So all of the research was really with the intention of getting itself turned into an extension product. But we spoke everywhere from field edges to barns to hotels. So it was kind of nice when you go from a field to a barn. You don't appreciate shade until you don't have it. But the impact, this has really formed how I see impact in a faculty role. So my research was stakeholder led. I was really there to work on regionally specific things that were directed toward issues that we were having in North Central Florida. So when you work on small regional things like that, as far as having even a regional impact can become difficult, a national or global impact becomes even more difficult. Now, we were able to publish a lot of papers, but my H-index has never been high because of the type of work I was doing, and I never had a high impact IFAS publication. However, the vast majority of the research we collected was translated into products like this. And this publication has been downloaded tens of thousands of times. I have had calls from people in Texas, Alabama, South Carolina, all over, because this has been a guiding publication, and it's one of many. So my impact, though it doesn't show up as an H factor, the impact was in things like this, because this became the standard for how certain plants were managed in the South. And by the way, EDIS, people will complain about EDIS, that it's cumbersome, it's this or it's that, but I'll tell you, no other university that I've worked with has a similar system. These things are very easy to find. And when you put something in there and it stays there and it starts getting traction, Google highly prioritizes these things. So when you want to make an impact, you put something in here, you keep it in there, you keep it fresh, and it becomes a marquee publication. Okay. Now, while I was doing this work, so I came in 2004. Within 10 years, I'd been promoted to full professor. Things were going well. The lab was working. But what I found was what I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the research. I enjoyed the publishing process. I enjoyed the conferences. But these were the people that I really found that I enjoyed more than anything else, is working with the students, working with the people, bringing folks in, seeing where they were, where they ended up, and watching them go from somebody that didn't have a lot of confidence in their skills to someone that is now in a big time job somewhere else that is constantly being promoted. This person here has been promoted about 8 times within Monsanto and now in Bayer. She's pretty high up there. So this is where I found more interest, and that's where I really wanted to see my my program go. So I wanted more involvement on the people side. So in 2017, the position came available for director at the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. So now, I'd only been in UF as a faculty member for 13 years. Why was I looking at making a change this quick? Well, because I saw the center as something, it was a place that had a really good reputation, both nationally and internationally. It was a place that I was familiar with the subject matter. So I was a weed control specialist, and this is different types of weeds, but at some level, weeds are weeds and herbicides are herbicides and management is management. So I said, I feel comfortable with the mission and what we're trying to accomplish. But more than anything is it gave me an opportunity to manage people at a different scale. More people, different types of people. So yeah, there were still graduate students there that I got to interact with, which was always super cool. But now we had an opportunity to interact with undergraduates. I had really never had a program that was set up to work with undergraduates. We had that now. But more than anything is I had the opportunity to hire and develop faculty and staff. So when I came to the center, there were 2 faculty members, including myself. One of them retired, and it was me and one other scientist. He got lonely for a little while, but we were very fortunate, and the timing was right, because soon thereafter, I had the opportunity to hire 3 faculty members within 6 months. I also had the opportunity to hire a number of staff positions. So the center was formed in 1978, and a bunch of the staff were hired around that time. So in 2017, they were looking to retire. So again, the timing was right. I had the opportunity to hire a bunch of staff members as well as faculty. So currently at the center, of all the faculty and staff, there's only 2 people that I didn't hire. So I have been able to really develop it into something based on a vision that I had for that center. Now, when I got there, I stopped doing research. I said, I don't think it's fair for me to continue to do research when there are 3 brand new faculty members that need access to that funding and for those opportunities. So I completely mothballed the program because I don't think it's right when you've got somebody brand new under pressure to publish and do work. And oh, by the way, the center director has 2 greenhouses full, and there was this grant that came in that I just went ahead and got for myself. I was still out attracting funding, but I was attracting it for them. So what did I do? So to basically continue with the creativity that research gives you and that outlet that it provides, I really threw myself into developing a new communication strategy for the center. So the center had a longstanding outreach group, and they had been world famous for a very long time, but they hadn't innovated in a number of years. When they started retiring, I said, it's time to completely revitalize and revamp what our communication strategy is. So I hired a couple of trained communicators. And by the way, hiring a scientist and telling them to communicate is a very different thing than hiring a communicator and telling them to learn the science. So it's easier to train somebody on enough science to communicate it properly if they understand communication than to try to get that scientist to learn the communication techniques, has been my experience. So I threw myself into this project and these programs. At one time, we had 4 people. We now have 2 full-time folks in that role still. But the 2 that I have, one is completing a PhD in communications. The other just finished their master's. So they are highly skilled, highly trained, and we have done a lot of pace setting, both nationally and regionally. The other thing the center allowed me to do was interact with an entirely different group of stakeholders. So in my previous role, I was really working with individual farmers in a lot of cases. So I was working with them, and there was one goal in me working with them, is to increase profit. That was the one goal that a farmer wants. Well, then I go to the center and I'm working with agencies. There are very few individual people that you're working with. Yeah, sure, there's ponds and there's things like that, but there's not an economic incentive. It's all habitat-based incentive. And working with water management is they have one set of responsibilities. FWC has a set of responsibility. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a whole other mandate. And they're differing. And with all of this, there's stakeholder involvement and stakeholder input. I had never had to work with stakeholders. Stakeholders aren't involved in corn weed management. Stakeholders are absolutely involved with lake or prairie restoration. So it taught me a lot about how different organizations, how you have to communicate across different stakeholder groups. I also learned that when a vehicle quits and you're in a pasture, you can at least walk out. When you're on an airboat and it quits and you're in 4 feet of water, you can't walk out. So there's a whole different level of dependence. And this picture is a broken down airboat day. That was awesome. The other thing that I learned being at the center is when you manage facilities, there's always something you don't expect. Never before had I gotten a call that said, what did we do with the alligator in the greenhouse? That was new. Fortunately, we had a guy, it wasn't his first rodeo, and he had dealt with alligators in the greenhouse before. So managing facilities brings its own all sorts of little tricks and things that you have to understand and become current with. All right, from there, let's transition into why am I interested in being a chair, right? So, and understanding, and I think from here, I'm going to talk about how I see the role, what it means, and how I make decisions based on how I see things. So I start with this question is, what is a chair, right? So are you a hiring authority? Are you a manager, an advocate? Are you a leader? What is a chair? And basically, to me, these are all roles that a department chair must play. None of them are the job, but they're all parts of the job. So there's a number of skills and things that you have to work through. The way I see a chair is they are the bridge between the faculty and administration. Okay. So a chair is in a unique scenario where you have to manage up and down. You have to manage the faculty and you have to make sure they're successful, get them into a place that you can then help sell those ideas and concepts to the deans to help make sure there can be investment in what you are doing in the department. So if you don't manage up and down, you're going to find yourself in a precarious place. Being completely dedicated to the faculty can put you at odds with the deans. Being too aligned with the deans can put you at odds with the faculty. So it's an interesting place to be because you have to have loyalty to both. All right. But this is how I see what a chair is it's truly the connection between faculty and upper administration. I then see that in this, the chair has two primary jobs. And it is the one job is as a manager, departmental manager. The other is as a departmental leader. And they are different. And it's easy to rely on one versus the other, but you really have to do both. You can't spend all your time goal setting and not signing forms. You can't spend all your time signing forms and not thinking about the future. So you have to have both of these coming together, and most people will rely on one versus the other. So finding that balance for your personality and style, as well as the nature of the department, takes time to figure out what the right balance is. So I want to talk now a little bit about the role as manager. Okay. I would suggest, in my opinion, the way I see things, one of, if not the most important roles of a department head is to hire and promote highly qualified faculty. Because if you're not doing this, if you're not hiring the best people and then help getting them promoted, then the department is either stagnant or going backwards. So a lot of effort and time needs to be put into thinking about this. And I'm going to talk about my philosophy on hiring. And a lot of that is going to be based on the mistakes I've made. So having the opportunity to hire people at the department or at the center has really influenced how I'm thinking about this. So my view of hiring is that it needs to be a bottom-up process. It has to start with the faculty really identifying the types of positions that are needed in the department. Faculty are in a much better position to understand what is happening in their field and help position a department, not just for the next couple of years, but possibly for the next 30 years. I had never heard of an AI genomics position. Well, the faculty brought that to the department a few years ago when we hired one of those people. That would not have been something that was ever on my radar. So it needs to be a bottom-up process. However, the chair then has the responsibility to prioritize these based on the needs of IFAS. So again, this is that dual role of being between administration and faculty, because the chair has to then sell this based on what is going on in the greater scheme of IFAS, and you have to be plugged into what's going on to understand how to do that. Hiring should consider candidate quality and fit. Now, and notice I've underlined "and" because I have done both of these by themselves and have not been successful. I have hired people that were extremely high quality, but didn't have the fit, and 2 years later, they were not happy. They just never became part of the community. and they were looking to move to a different position. I've hired people that everybody loved, but really didn't have the quality piece. And I knew it when I hired them. And I said, but I think we can get them in here. I think I can train them up. All they need is some good mentoring, get in this group, this great group. And before long, this person will be turned around. But I knew the quality wasn't there, and I talked myself out of it. So I've become more convinced that quality and fit are needed, and it's very difficult. And because of that, I've learned that you have to be willing to fail a search. And this is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. When you look at a search committee and they have busted their behinds, recruiting, doing all of those dinners, doing all of these things, spending days and days and days and days and days in the process, you get to the end and you say, folks, these candidates aren't right. We're going to have to start again. That can be very demoralizing. But again, I have had searches that I knew I needed to fail and didn't, and it didn't turn out well. I had a county agent, Ed Jowers. I don't know if anybody ever even knew him. He was the county agent, county director in Jackson County. He told me years ago a maxim that I know is true. And he said, I would rather have a chair that's empty than a chair that I wish was empty. And boy, have I found that to be the case. And my part here is a chair has to be willing to fail a search if it is not the right fit, lest you end up with a chair that you wish was empty. Now, after the hire, so I had my master's advisor had a big impact on me, and he was one of these guys that would always throw out these, bodacious statements. I asked him one time about, how do you hire people? What are you looking for? He's, oh, it's easy. You hire the best people and stay out of their way. That's what you do. And there is something to that, right? However, I do not believe that is the right path for a department chair, because there are some people that don't understand what the system truly is. And by staying out of their way, you can really set somebody up that has a misunderstanding of the system. So what I've learned in my time is after the hire is just as important as the hire itself. That number one, the path to promotion starts on day one. You have to start with these people and first ensure that they understand the system. Do they know what IFAS is looking for? Do they know what third year review is and why we do it? Do you understand what tenure and promotion is? What is the process and why we do it? Making sure they understand those pieces is really important. Number two, articulating the expectations is key. So not only do you have to tell them, you have to also don't assume that they're going to understand. So I have had folks that I've worked with and said, this is what we need. And then you come back a few months later and they're doing the opposite of that. Why are you doing the opposite of it? Because they didn't understand, because I didn't properly articulate what the expectation was. So just because you tell people, that doesn't mean that they are hearing what you're saying. And it also doesn't mean you have said it like you should have said it. I've learned that as well. The second thing I've learned after the hire is you have to shield people from excessive service. It is really easy when you have somebody that comes in, they're excited, they're a go-getter, everything is new. And, it's every time you look at them, their tail's wagging. They're just so happy to be here. And it's easy to go, okay, well, here's this great opportunity. Every time I heard this is a great opportunity, I was like, oh, opportunity for who? I don't know, opportunity for you or opportunity for me. Meanwhile, you have senior faculty that have served and served and served and served. And it's very easy to say, my gracious, they need a break. So let's go to those junior faculty members. But you have to shield them from excessive service, lest they end up doing things that are not translating directly into promotion. And then third, I've learned that you have to be patient, particularly after the hire, because these folks are under incredible stress. I remember as an assistant professor, my chair, he probably thought I had a brain injury, because every time he asked me to do something, I would say, no, but before he was even finished with what he was like, no. So he was extremely patient with me, and we got there eventually. But he understood that yet he needed to offer me opportunities to serve, but he also was patient and understood I needed to work into some of those roles. So a couple of responsibilities of manager: one, promote and hire and promote highly qualified people. Secondly, fiscal management is a big, important part. And this is how I see fiscal management. This is how I approach it. I am not a budget expert, and I'll probably never be a budget expert, but I do work hard to understand the big picture of the budget. So people call it the color of money. I call it the buckets of money. It's kind of the same thing, because there's some, just because the color is different doesn't mean they're in different buckets, in my opinion. So understanding what money needs to be turned annually, what money can be banked, what money needs to be used with a different strategy is very important for me. Number two, it's my approach to this is you have to manage your budget responsibly, but without being stingy. So case in point, we have the Fair Labor Standards Act that is potentially coming, that may dramatically increase salaries for certain parts of our staff, members of our staff. How are we going to address that? If you haven't, been fiscally responsible, then it's going to be very difficult to handle these, out of the blue things that come down from the federal government. But I also know, and I have observed people that are just basically stingy with departmental funds, that this money shouldn't be there for pet projects for the chair. The money that is coming down for the reason of improving faculty programs. And if that money is not being invested in faculty programs, then what are we doing with it? Why? That is the point. The deans are pushing this money down for the faculty, not for vanity projects for the chair. But also, I believe with this funding, that junior faculty deserve more access to the resources than the senior faculty. Now, that doesn't say that the senior faculty don't deserve it. They absolutely do. But I would hope that over the years, the senior faculty have also been responsible, and they have been able to build up residual accounts, royalty accounts, IDC accounts that they can rely on to be a buffer for these unforeseen things that happen to them. The junior faculty have not had that time in rank to develop that. So it's been my experience and my belief that the role of the chair is to disproportionately help the junior faculty to get them to that senior faculty place that they can then be more independent. And then fourth, you have to be transparent with your budget. That people need to understand where the money is and where the money's going. And to be honest, when you're using, my experience is when you implement this strategy and you're investing money back in faculty programs, the transparency piece becomes a very short conversation because there's not a lot of money left. It's being invested. These accounts over here are being held. These annual accounts are being invested, but people need to see and understand what is going on so that there's not confusion. And then lastly here, there's a piece on general management, because I think that is another responsibility of the chair. To me, I believe the chair must be two things in the department. You have to be responsive and you have to be present. So responsive, when somebody has been working for 60 days with a group of 7 people at 5 institutions to get a big grant pulled together, and it's usually at the midnight hour that these things are coming in, it's pretty irresponsible of the chair to sit on that you first approval for days and days when they have worked so hard. So you've got to be responsive. You've got to keep these things moving. And my policy, even back as an extension specialist, is I always tried to have a 24-hour response policy on emails. Now that response may be, I'll get to this later, but I've always tried to have a 24-hour turnaround on those things. Secondly, a chair has to be present. I was asking somebody, what does a successful chair look like? And they said half of the job is showing up. being there, being present. If you're not there and people can't find you, before long, they're going to stop looking. And that's not a great place for you to be. So the department needs to have a reasonable understanding that they can find the chair if they need them. However, the chair needs to know that an open door policy only goes so far. So just being present is not enough. And this really hit me hard a few years ago. I was in Lead 21. We were talking about management styles and doing these things. And at the time, I had a master's student who was interested in coming into my program as a PhD student. And I didn't want to take the student. I said, the guy never comes to see me. He never comes and asks me questions. I don't think he's that interested. So I don't think I'm going to take him as a PhD student. And the person I was talking to, they said, well, why do they not come? I said, I don't know. I have an open door policy. They can come anytime they want. And then she asked me, just because you have an open door policy, do they feel welcome to come in? I was like, ouch, that was not what I wanted to hear. But that is a big piece that is something I consistently and constantly have to work on. So I understand that the department chair also has to be one that goes to the faculty, and not only to be available when they need you, but also to be available when the department just needs to be thinking about them. So here are some of the roles of the chair from a manager standpoint, but now I'm going to transition into the chair as a leader. So I think one of the primary things a chair needs to do is set expectations for the department and for the faculty, as well as for the staff. One of those is the expectation of productivity. What does it mean to be in this department? What are we looking for? Now, I talked about being clear about expectations as a manager. This is a little bit different. It's similar, but a little bit different. But this is also it's not just making sure your packet is together, but there's all sorts of things that are departmental roles. What is the expectation about serving this department as a citizen? And it needs to be clear and consistent, but it also has to be flexible. There are people in the department that at any given time are going through a lot of different things, and not everybody has the same scenario in their personal life. So being able to see these things and be flexible. Now, that doesn't mean completely forgiving of all types of scheduling and behavior, but it does mean being flexible and understanding that people are at a place now, you need flexibility. They'll probably be in a different place later. Also, as far as setting expectations is also the expectation of how to conduct yourself in the department. I think we've all seen departments that with time, they take on the personality of the chair. And I think we have seen this go really, really well. I don't know if any of you remember Tim White, who was at forestry for those years. I can't tell you how many people have said, there was a lot of times I disagreed with him, but I always respected him because he set a tone for the department that really went beyond the individual decisions. And this one is one that I take very seriously, because I know I had the potential in me to react in ways that are not always the best. But I do take this seriously and understand that it is the role. If a chair wants to have a productive, helpful department that really believes in citizenship, then it has to be first mirrored in the chair's office. Another thing the chair must do is lead the people. And my sort of outlook on that and the way I do it is my primary go-to is in a coaching, encouraging role, helping people understand what we're doing, help them understand what I'm looking for. But there's also a lot of different things that, depending on the scenario, it's not always the most appropriate to be the coach. There are other things that a chair has to do, but this is one of my go-tos. Now, a lot of people will list citizen or a servant leader here. I'm not discussing that one because if you are in leadership in a public institution, you're going to be you're basically a servant leader, because none of us are doing this for the money, right? We're doing this for the love of the game. We're doing this for the interest in the institution and the people. So I lead first with coaching, encouraging, and secondly, as a connector. I see one of the roles as chair. I see one of the roles as chair is helping people see from a bigger perspective. A lot of times people are working on things and they don't necessarily know there are other folks that have worked on this before. As chair, you can connect those folks with the right people, save them those steps, save them that time. So a connector is something that I have been able to fulfill in the past. Now, there's also an issue with one of the struggles of leading people is, when do you intervene in a behavioral issue? We all have bad days. We all say things we shouldn't say. We all act in ways we shouldn't act. And is that a today issue? Is it a persistent issue? Because you can very quickly intervene in something and make it worse. But we've all seen the individual that people say, yeah, I usually go to the bathroom the long way when I know so-and-so is in their office, so I don't have to walk by their office. I've had people tell me, yeah, I got this nasty email from Dr. So-and-so, and I've heard the response be, we've been here a year. I can't believe it took that long. So when that is the scenario, then it has gone on too long. I don't know when the best time always is to intervene, but I can tell you that I have had more than my share of HR issues in the past. And I'm not perfect, but I'm better than I was. I understand it better than I used to. But this is a hard one, and it's never going to get easy. And by the way, I would suggest, HR issues probably, all in all, 5% of your time, 5%, but it can take 60 or 70% of your bandwidth at certain times. So it can be really tough, but that's part of the job, and you got to be willing to handle it. Now, wrapping up here, goals for the department. Now, I'm hoping that you guys are not sitting here thinking, all right, my goals are 5 endowed chairs by the end of the decade, fundraising for a new building, all of those things that you would hope a forward-thinking leader is going to do. Well, I'll tell you, that's not where I'm at, and that's not where my head is. So my number one goal for the department is to bring consistency. So I've had faculty members tell me I've been evaluated 4 times, but from a different person each year. I had another faculty member tell me, I've been told this, I've been told this, what do you want? So I think a need for this department is consistency. Now, fortunately, we have really, really, really good people, from senior faculty to junior faculty and everything in between. But I think there is a need for consistency, and that is one of the things that I think I can provide. So I don't have any intention of going anywhere anytime soon. I don't want to leave Gainesville, don't plan to leave Gainesville. I honestly am not interested in being a dean today. The goal for me being interested in this role is not so that someday I can be a dean. Now, that might happen, I don't know, but that is not my interest. That's not my it's not my goal. I was in a faculty role for 13 years. I've been at the center for 7. My intention is to be here for quite some time in this role. And I'll just tell you, I think it's going to take me 2 years. If I end up in this role, it'll take 2 years before I really understand the role. And then we go from there. So it's going to take a minute. But in the short term, one of my goals is to bring consistency. And then secondly is to try to ensure a shared vision for the department. So again, super talented people that fit very well, but there's been a lot of different voices. There have been a lot of different things that have influenced this department for the last couple of years, and making sure that there is consistency and shared vision so that everybody understands, what are we trying to accomplish as a department? What does it mean to be a successful department? And with that, what does that mean to be a successful member of this faculty community? So that is, those are the two goals. There's not a third. So again, maybe there should be more forward-thinking big things, but those are my two goals for the department if I end up in this position. So that being said, that takes us to the end. I think we're
Plenty of time for questions.
right on time. Yes.
Retention has been a challenge across IFAS, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your, about how you at faculty and staff level while you were director there, and your vision for retaining faculty and staff.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you retain faculty and staff? And what is my experience with it? Well, it's a tough thing to do, right? Particularly with new faculty members, because a new faculty member is more marketable than any other type of individual. So if you want to make a jump, hold on a second, let me see. Well, for some reason, it's not figuring out what camera to put me in. Regardless, if you're going to make a move, it's easier to make a move as a junior faculty than it is as a senior faculty, right? So it can really be within your economic and professional interest to make those moves. Now, my goal is twofold in this. If this place is not the best fit for you, when we have hired the best and we have hired good people, I want you to stay here. I want you to be happy, and I want you to have a highly productive 40-year career here if that's what you want. But more importantly than that, I want you to be happy in your role. And if you can't be happy here, then work with me and I will try to help you any way I can to get you to a place where you can ultimately be happy. In the meantime, I see it as the role of chair to work with these people, understand what would be the reason that they're not fitting. What is the reason why they're not happy? And are there things departmentally that I can influence with that? Is it because there's too much service? Is it because your appointment's wrong? We have people that have the wrong appointment, but there is a very good pathway to change those appointment numbers. And if teaching is a better fit than extension, let's figure that out. If your research appointment is simply too high, let's figure out what that can mean. So I think there are things like that. Now, it's really easy to say the goal is to throw money at people and to do retention offers, and that is absolutely there too. But money is a piece of the puzzle. The emotion, and it's one we focus on a lot. I think the emotional piece, the fit piece, and how are they working and operating within the department is more important a lot of times, and more emphasis should be put on that. Rose.
And they're hard ones to follow with. So I guess I've learned also from sort of these interview processes that sometimes you see words, but you don't really, and you think you know what the person means because they're really general terms. So what do you mean by fit? You know, and then you said a shared vision. So is that fit related to, you know, what everybody, the mantra of we're so diverse? You know, we have so many different areas, and what is consistency? I think those are really important goals, and I like those words, but I just want to know better what you mean by fit. Like, how is somebody fit for a role in your mind, and what is the level of consistency? Not only, you know, you gave the example of, you know, during an evaluation and consistency of, you know, expectations, but what other things do you see in terms of consistency?
Okay. So the question is, what do I primarily mean when I talk about proper fit in a department? And secondly, what do I mean when I say I want to ensure consistency? So with fit, the way I see it is departments can operate two different ways. Departments can operate as a unit, or departments can operate as a group of independent contractors. Okay. So the independent contractor model is not a bad model. You bring in highly productive people, you turn them loose, and they go do their thing. However, I am not as big of a fan of the independent contractor model. I understand that faculty often feel that way because they attract their own money, they attract their own students, and they have to build their own program. But for me, fit is, do you want to, can we find people that not only want to build programs, but also want to be part of this thing that we're trying to form, which is a department where we have collaboration, where we have unity within the group. So that is what I mean by fit. And I have seen an example of this at another institution. I know of a scientist at a different place. He has his own building. And at one time, I think he had almost 60 people reporting to him. Big program. He publishes a paper in Science every other year, like you do. But he hasn't been to a faculty meeting in 10 years. He has not been to a departmental retreat in 10 years. And I have never heard a single person in that department that has ever been able to collaborate with this guy. So is he good? Yeah. Does he fit? Not really. And even though he brings a lot of resources, at the end of the day, is it best? Are those resources outweighing all the other things that he's bringing in the department, the drama and the other things? So that's what I mean about fit, is how do we make sure we're not out just looking for independent contractors that'll come in and do the flashy thing. Then what do I mean by consistency? I think what I'm trying to get across there is, what are the expectations of the department? What are the expectations for success? And what are we wanting people to do? What is the message for what does it mean to be in this department? So that is what I'm trying to get across with the term consistency. Heather?
I can't see who's behind me, so I don't want to. So I actually want to follow up with the question that Rose asked about the fit. And I think I also heard something that you said that really struck me, was that you're a connector. And that connection means that you bring in, whether they're new or just new to a topic, like what is the history of this department and how does that impact us moving forward? And I see that also as a role, if you have people that fit, that role of being the connector is so much more straightforward. Maybe?
Yeah. So if I
that's what I thought was what something you said and wrote this question.
So
that's a question.
I think the question is asked me to elaborate on how does a department move forward with retaining identity but while remaining relevant, right? So I'm of the opinion that if a department isn't moving forward, no department ever stays in place. There's no such thing as staying put. You're either moving forward or people are passing you. And if people are passing you, then that means you're moving backwards, right? So balancing what a department is very difficult, particularly in a state like Florida. And I've always said it's easy to long for things you don't understand. But I look at Iowa and go, you've got 4 people you got to keep happy. You got soybeans, corn, pigs, and cows. That's it. My God, that would be so easy. I'm sure it's way more complicated than that. But you look at Florida and say, we've got 60 commodities. We've got stakeholders all over the place. So how do we balance stakeholder engagement, stakeholder relevance? Because if we lose relevance with our stakeholders, they carry so much water for us legislatively every year. So how do we maintain that connection without being a group that says we're going to work on corn, soybeans, pigs, and cows, and that's it? Because that doesn't work. You have to move forward in genetics. You have to move forward in in your omics fields and all of these other things with AI. So that is the delicate balance. So that is where I was talking about the chair has to really balance between the needs and the direction of the upper administration, as well as what is going on with the identity of the department, as well as the stakeholder needs. And you have to balance those. So that is how I see that process working. So this agronomy department doesn't look like hardly any other agronomy department in the country, nor do we look like we did 10 years ago. And that is not a bad thing. It's what it is. So the key, I think, is what do we need to continue to look like in the future, and how do we strategically invest and think about that as we go forward?
Do you mind if I ask a question this time? Thank you.
Please do.
Okay, so this is about, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm from soil, water, and ecosystem sciences. And I view agronomy as being very graduate student oriented, because you have a master's in a PhD program. And your undergraduate program, correct me if I'm wrong, is underneath this broader plant sciences, the horticulture and environmental work now. And I think those are the three different departments, right? Oh, and plant path, that's right. Thank you. Please forgive me, any plant pathologists in here, because that is also very important. Okay, so I teach this intro to soils lab. Sorry, I'm going to get to my question. And I get a lot of the plant sciences student coming through, and your story going into your undergraduate program still resonates with them. I talked to them in the beginning of the week, like what is horticulture and what is agronomy. So I just would love to just see a vision for the role of agronomy in the plant sciences undergraduate degree program, with y'all now being in 3 different departments. I mean, what that looks like going forward. That's finally my question.
Well, so the question was, how does the agronomy department be at an agronomy department when at the undergrad level we're connected with a multi-departmental major, the plant science major? So that's a great question, and it's one that I'm probably not real well positioned to answer right now. But I will tell you, from my perspective, the plant science program is an outpouring of the need to transition and to continue to move forward, because across all of those departments, we were facing shrinking undergrad numbers. So we either accept irrelevance individually, or we adopt some form of relevance collectively. So how do you then stand out or identify yourself in that role? And I, like I said, I don't know the answer to that, because I'm not interested in how do I steal more students from plant path, or how do I steal students from hort, because if agronomy's got more than Chris Gunter has, that makes me look more successful. But we're going backwards if we're doing that. So I think the key is, how do we develop more interest in this major? I keep hearing this term that it is a found major. And that is my experience as well. I literally went to a preview night, never heard of this stuff before, and that's what got me. That is a very slow way of getting individuals. When you're trying to target individual students into a major, boy, that's a lot of effort per individual. So I think there needs to be a lot of thought put into how do we be found more efficiently. And I think if we can be found more efficiently, then all of a sudden it's almost like the tide raises every boat in the harbor. So if we can be found more efficiently, every program is elevated, because more people understand what we're doing, and then they will gravitate to their interests, whether it be plant path or agronomy.
Jay, I want to ask you to click on the chat. I saw some questions popping up there. Also, I don't want to ignore questions on Zoom.
All right, we'll go here. All right.
Also, we might still be screen sharing. Maybe that's why the camera's not working.
Well, let me get
Yeah.
let me see if I can find a question here.
There's not.
Well, so I see Chris Moran's question, what are the department's current greatest strengths? But I don't think I want to answer Chris Moran's question. But no, that's a really tough one. But when you look at the strengths of this department, I would have said this. I think my answer would have been the same 20 years ago as it is now, and it's the people. When you look top to bottom, this department, and it doesn't matter what metrics you use, this department has consistently had some of the most productive faculty relative to their FTE as anybody in IFAS. So not only would I put the agronomy department head to head from a productivity standpoint, choose the metric with any agronomy department in the country, I would put the department head to head with any other department in IFAS. We have really, really good people. We have a history of hiring well and doing a very good job with targeting new areas of research, maintaining the relationship with our FTE in extension. So I think we have maintained high research productivity while not losing what we have on the stakeholder relations side. But the other strength, again, is with the people. We have folks that want to do what we're doing and believe in what we're doing. So again, I don't know all the departments as well, but I wouldn't trade our folks for anybody else. Gerard, research scientist positions within the labs could attract grant funding and improve student mentoring quality. Do you think this type of strategy is within the scope and vision? And how do you think the research scientist position should be supported? Boy, I'm going to click off the chat here. So the research scientists, in a lot of ways, are the unsung heroes of any department. You know, I read a lot of military history, and they always say that an army is only as good as their non-commissioned officers. That's who, at the end of the day, the generals take all the credit, but it's the sergeants and the lieutenants that are making the decisions and making the army work. And I think the research scientists are that. They are the ones that they're running the programs a lot of times. The faculty are there to provide oversight. They're there to provide vision and find those dollars. At the end of the day, it's the research scientists, the postdocs that are really handling day-to-day operations. And the best programs have long-term people who are highly invested in programs, and they are there to work with the students, to do the research, and to really make the program shine. So how should these be supported? That's the difficulty, is we really don't have a model where departments or even the college is, pitching in to do this. They are still programmatically led positions. So could we think about changing this, adopting a new model? Maybe so. It's worth considering, but if we don't have these research scientist positions, we really, again, we start going backwards. There's a lot of work that gets done there that is not always fully appreciated. Good, that's the last one in the chat. Bill, I think you had your hand up, and then I think we only have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, so your goals were to bring consistency and ensure the shared vision of the department, but you also said leaders need to lead. And so can you just tell us in like a minute, what is Jay Ferrell's vision for the agronomy department? What's your contribution to that?
So the question is, how do I intend to lead the department? Is that?
No, what's your vision for the agronomy department? I know you want to ensure a shared vision, and so you'll be a part of that, but what's your contribution to that? Like, what is your vision?
Yeah.
Jay's vision?
So as I indicated, the chair sets the tone. The chair is the one who ends up basically being the personality, for lack of a better term, of the department. So what does that then functionally mean? Well, I want this to be a department where people want to be here. I want it to be a department where people feel supported. I want it to be a department where people feel that they can have a productive career. those are the things that I want to spend time figuring out how to do and how to get the resources to make sure those people can do those things. I think it's unfair to bring folks in and then orphan them and say, all right, well, here you are. Here's your office. Go to work. There's a lot more that the chair needs to do to make sure the people are fitting in to this role, understanding this role. And if they do that, I think a lot of pieces organically start to come and fit together. So if you're looking for a broader, this is the direction or this is the 20-year vision, I'm really not in a position to provide that. But I do think by doing some of these issues, some of these things to get people together, make sure everybody understands how the process works and their role in it, will get us to the place that we want to be within 10 to 15 or 20 years. But it has to start there.
We have time for one more in the room, and then remember, for those of you who are in the room, we're gonna migrate to 2108 after this, so the conversation can continue. We just lose this room.
Yeah, last question, Chris.
Yeah, I think just dovetailing off of Bill's question, I gather from that you're happy to kind of maintain the eclectic disciplinary identity.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I guess the statement was based on what I've said.
I think that's what you're getting.
Oh, I'm glad to hear the answer to this one too.
So
I really wanted to know the vision, but I also want to know if I fit. So.
Chris's question was basically, how do I see this eclectic group that we call agronomy? Because it is very non-traditional, right? Well, what I would say is it's working. So are we a traditional agronomy department? No. Do we need to be? No. This is a non-traditional agronomy state. And I think it would be wrong-headed if the next 5 hires were corn and soybean breeders, right? Because that is really, how do we serve our stakeholders? How do we serve our students by trying to be something that ultimately we're not? So this is working for us. We are hiring people that are doing things that are important for this state. We're bringing in the graduate students where they're being properly functionally trained and going out and being successful. So I see this as a model that's working, and I don't understand why we would want to change that at this point.
Okay, so let's give Jay a big hand. We'll dismiss the folks on Zoom. Thank you for participating. Those of you who are in other meetings later on, appreciate you coming. We'll see you later this afternoon.